Thanks for joining us. My name is Josh Jacobowski, and I am the Information Systems and Data Analysis Division Director for the Indiana Department of Local Government Finance. Happy to have you here on the webinar today. We're going to be focused on, for the most part, the real and personal property data submission process and how that's going to be occurring over the next month or so, as well as an overview of the entire compliance review process that starts here with the initial submissions by the real and personal property data, and then wraps up in the springtime, usually in about April or May is when we kind of close the book on the entire process. I'd like to take this opportunity to also introduce just the other two members of the Data Analysis Division. They're not going to be a part of this presentation, but they will be heavily involved in the process. Delbia Jones is, I'm going to call her a veteran of the Data Analysis Division now. She's going to be starting her third cycle here. If you've worked in the county assessor's office or county auditor's office, you may have interacted some with Delbia. She's terrific, and really happy to have her starting here this third cycle. We've also hired a new data analyst that's starting just this summer. Her name is Velvet Jones. Velvet's been terrific so far, and we're really happy to have her. I've been telling Velvet that this is a really good time to get started here in the Data Analysis Division because you're coming in right at the very beginning of the Pay 2025 cycle for the Data Analysis Division. So she's going to get to see from start to end the entire process. So that's what we'll be talking about here at the beginning or throughout this webinar, is kind of that start of the process. And then, like I said, a brief overview of that takes us into the spring with the spring compliance reviews as well. There you go. So here's our agenda for today, and I'm aiming for about 45 to 50 minutes if I can. I'd like to try and keep it under an hour. That way that if folks have any questions at the end, I'd be happy to answer those. As Jenny mentioned, if you can please just make sure to type your questions into the chat box feature here within the Teams. I'm not going to stop the webinar at any point to answer questions necessarily, but I will, like I said, I'm trying to save time at the end to make sure that I am able to get those questions answered. And if we run out of time, if I go over and we just don't have time to answer those questions directly, we're really good about, Jenny's really good about getting those copied down and sent over to me, and I'll be sure to reach back out to you. If you just make sure you leave your name or an email address, we'll make sure to do that. I wanted to also make mention of the fact that most of this presentation is geared a little bit more towards county assessors, as well as the folks who work obviously in the county assessor's office. If you are, that doesn't apply to you, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be completely foreign. There's a lot of good information in here, especially if you're in a county auditor's office even. There'll be some points that will be brought up in the presentation that will apply directly to you. And if you're just interested in learning more about how the process works, it's definitely a good thing to stick around, and hopefully I can help you understand it a little bit better. But this training session is broken down into two main objectives for the most part. I want you to try and develop a better understanding of the different data sets that get submitted to the department. Those data sets come into us. The due date is August 31st on those. And for most counties, there's only two data sets. It's those first two bullet points kind of underneath that in that first section there. The real property data set consists of 7 different files that get submitted to us, as well as the personal property data set, which consists of 3 data files that are then submitted to the department. We have about 15 or 16 counties here in Indiana that do have oil and gas assessment information that needs to be sent into the department. And so for those 15 or 16 counties, this is also that time of year when that data set needs to be submitted to us. So we'll be talking about each one of those data sets and kind of giving you a more detailed look at what all is inside there, as well as the due dates and how that all kind of fits together. After we've done that, or in kind of different parts, we'll look at the different items or checks that that the department currently looks at as part of our review process. As I mentioned, we have the fall compliance review that we're about to get into here once we've received all of the data, all of these real property and personal property submissions, and then that wraps up in the spring for our entire cycle. Okay, so I copied this directly from the calendar that gets posted at the beginning of each year. This is the calendar specifically is for the data analysis division. It outlines all of the different due dates for when things need to be submitted to us. There's also a calendar that we have. I believe it comes out in a memo, so it's under the memos section of our website. But it's we have one for the budget division, all of the important dates for that division and when things need to be submitted for them. We also have a calendar for the assessment division and then also the data division. And so this is kind of the most important one, in my opinion, for the data division when the real and personal property and the oil and gas need to be submitted to us. It is August 31st, so we have the rest of this month and then all of next month to get those files submitted to the department. The 7, if you kind of look in each box and then in the parentheses with the capital letters, we're starting to look then at the specific files that are part of the data set. So that real property assessment data set consists of 7 files. There's the parcel file, the land file, the improved file, the dwelling file, the building detail file, and then the appeal file. That entire set makes up the real property assessment data submission. We need to get all 7 of those files submitted to us at the same time for us to begin our review. In that same manner, or in a similar manner rather, the personal property is a little bit smaller data set. It only consists of 3 files. There's the purse prop, the pool data, and the appeal PP that gets submitted to us. And then for those counties that need to submit oil and gas assessment information to us, that comes in via the oil gas and oil gas all files. Okay, I'm going to start talking first about the real property assessment data, start with the biggest set of them and kind of give some detail regarding each one of these files and what they contain and what then we will be turning around and looking for when we perform our compliance reviews on these data sets. So, and I probably should have mentioned this a little bit more towards the beginning, but this is a very important point, or I should have highlighted this better in my presentation rather. Right after the county assessor's office and county auditor's office have completed a successful roll and balance of their real property gross AVs, and I'm going to stop for a second because that's really important. We need to get that information first, or that needs to happen first before these data files are submitted to us. And once that occurs, once there's a successful roll of the data files from the county assessor's office and a balance then on the auditor's side, once that has been confirmed by both sides, that's when the data team can receive the files and start looking at everything. If that hasn't occurred yet, it could really throw a wrench in the entire works. So it's important that a successful roll and balance has occurred and that the DLGF has been notified of that successful roll and balance. So I included here twice, actually, in the next couple of bullet points, the data inbox. That is really the very best way to get a hold of us. And it's where the submissions, most of the submissions that come into the data team need to occur. So I will have a slide here at the very end of the presentation that has my email address, Velvet's email address, Delvia's email address. You're welcome to reach out to us directly via those. However, any email sent into the data inbox or these submissions need to go into the data inbox. That is really the best way to get a hold of us. It's something that we monitor very closely. And so highly recommend, if you have questions, submit them there to the data inbox. And as I'm mentioning here, the notification of a successful roll and balance needs to be sent to the department's data inbox. And then once that's done, then we can start receiving the files, which should be emailed to the data inbox as well. Okay, I'm very much a visual learner. I like pictures and drawings. That really helps me understand a lot better than just reading it. So I've got this diagram in here to help everyone understand the data hierarchy of how all these files kind of fit together from the real property side, at least. The top layer is that parcel file. That's really the biggest one. It has the I call it like the master list. It's going to have where everything is connected back to. It's a listing essentially of all of the different parcels across your county. Inside of that parcel, or rather connected to that parcel file, but in a separate file, are the land, improve, and appeal file. That kind of represents the next layer of the data, or like the next layer of detail, if you will. We start to get into some of the different specifics about individual parcels with those files there. The land obviously kind of focuses on the land that's inside of the parcel. The improve file is any kind of buildings or man-made structures that exist within that parcel. And then the appeal file is a listing of all of the different appeals that are currently active within your county for any of the real property assessments. We can further break down that improve file into, again, two other separate files. There's the building file and the dwelling file. The building file focuses specifically on any commercial and industrial buildings that are part of that improve file. The dwelling file then focuses, instead of on the commercial industrial like the building does, the dwelling file focuses on all of the residential buildings. And then because we have some commercial and industrial buildings that are quite large, we can further break that down, that building file into the building detail file, which is going to give us a more detailed look. It's our most granular level of the data that exists there, where I think it breaks down kind of on a floor-by-floor basis from each of the commercial and industrial buildings that we have. Okay, so I'll try and talk quickly here about each of the 7 files and just give you kind of a brief overview of what exists in that file and how we receive that information and then look at it. So the parcel file should contain a complete inventory of all of the parcels in your county. It's going to contain the kind of what I would say a little bit more basic data points, such as the property address, property owner information, and both prior year and current year assessed value information for each parcel. Now, that's not the only information that it has. The guiding document for the data analysis division, we always call it just 50 IAC 26. It is the Indiana code that governs the data submission process, and it details kind of the format for each one of these files, as well as what all is listed in there. There's a ton of information that comes into us via all 7 of these files. So I'm just trying to summarize some of the kind of more popular ones, I would say, in that second bullet point. But there's a lot more information that sits there within each one of these files. In 50 IAC 26 is something that's available online, and it's also something available that I can certainly send you a copy if that's something you're interested in. So you can look through the administrative code yourself and see the kind of the law behind why we collect this data and are required to perform our reviews on it. So getting back to the parcel file, again, that is like the topmost layer. It's going to include the inventory of all parcels. So everything else is going to be connected back to this file. Everything else, will be connected back to it. So like the next layer, if you will, if you remember my diagram, we had the land file as well as the improve, and then the appeal file is kind of in the second layer. What the land file focuses in on is the detail about the land in each parcel. So any given parcel, it is possible actually to have multiple land records depending upon how the land is divided up by its type and use. I would say like a common way, or not super common, but like when we see something that has multiple land records on it, that's usually a homestead that is in the middle of farmland. So that will be divided up into different areas or classified into different different records based on how that land is divided up. The farmland is different from just like the yard that is associated with that residential area. The land file will contain data points, and again, I'm summarizing here, data points such as land type and use, the base rate, the size, and the acreage, or that's either an acreage or square feet, the influence factors, as well as the ever important assessed value for that particular parcel. And then, as I mentioned there when I was talking about the parcel file, there's a connection that exists between every instance that is in the land file. That's something that we do in our reviews and our checks, is we check and make sure that every instance that's in the land file has to match back up to a parcel that is listed in the parcel file. Another separate file, but it's kind of on that same layer of data, if you will, is the improve file or improvement file. This is a complete inventory of all the real property improvements related to the parcels in that county. And again, they're just like with the land, where there's different types of land within a specific parcel, there can also be different improvements on a particular parcel. It may have more than one building within one parcel. It may have none of them, and most commonly, I think there's just one improvement. But we have seen the entire spectrum there: 0, 1, or multiple improvement records. The summary again of the data points is that we'll have the type of improvement that it is, the grade of the improvement, the condition, the size, the year built, and the assessed value. Each instance, again, that is in the improve file must link back up to a corresponding match in the parcel file. Just like with the land file, everything has to match back up to the parcel. I'm kind of skipping one that's on that second layer because it kind of hangs out all by itself, but the next file, so we're actually going to the third layer, if you will, if you can remember back to my diagram. The dwelling file is something that kind of is off the path of the improvement file. So it gives additional information regarding residential dwelling improvement records related to the parcels in the county. It is possible sometimes to have multiple dwelling records within one parcel, sometimes 0, sometimes 1, but it will contain the data points such as the story heights, the number of stories of the structure, the number of finished rooms, the size, again, I think that's in square footage, the value adjustments for things like air conditioning, garages. Again, we're getting to some more granular level of detail with each one of these files as we get kind of lower and lower on that chart. However, because it's got 2 levels above it, the dwelling file has to connect to the improve file, which in turn has to connect to the parcel file. So you can kind of follow down that hierarchy. Everything has to be connected. That parcel number is that primary key that helps us do that. Similar to the dwelling file is the building file, except whereas the dwelling focused on the residential buildings, the building file is one that focuses on the commercial and industrial building records. Similarly to the other files I've mentioned here, it is possible for a parcel to have 0, 1, or multiple building records. Some of the major data points that we find here in the building file is like the predominant use of the building, the number of floors that it has, the size, and total base value. And just like in the dwelling file, the building file has to have a corresponding match of the parcel number to link back to the improve file, which again links back to the parcel file. So it's all interconnected. It starts there with that parcel file, and you can just kind of filter it all the way down to all of the corresponding files that are connected to it. The most granular level of detail that we have is the building detail file. That one is an offshoot of the building file. So it gives us a little bit further detail, some additional information on the commercial and industrial buildings. Again, it is possible for a parcel to have 0, 1, or multiple building detail records. But essentially what this does is, again, we've got some pretty big commercial and industrial buildings. It's helpful to be able to break that down a little bit further. It takes the information that's in the building file and breaks down the data further by individual floor for a given building. So whatever is in that floor, it will consist of like the record for that given building. Each instance of a parcel number in the building detail file must have a corresponding match that's in the building file, which again links up to the improved file, which then again links up to the parcel file. It's all interconnected. And lastly, this guy kind of hangs off to the side by itself, but it is attached to the parcel file, is the appeal file. The appeal file consists of a complete inventory of all active appeal records related to the parcels in the county. Any given parcel can have 0, 1, or multiple appeal records. What we get here with this file is the data points that have information on the petitioner's contact information, the grounds for the appeal, the original value, the revised value, and again, 50 IAC 26 will list all of the different data points that are collected there with each one of these files. This one isn't linked to the other files necessarily, but it does have to match back up to the parcel file for each one of the parcel numbers that appear in the appeal file. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about the different files that we have and the different files that we collect and in the structure of those themselves. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we do with the files once we've received them. So this is really where, well, the data team is heavily involved in collecting those files. As I mentioned, those get submitted to us through the data inbox. And so Delbia and Velvet are doing a great job right now of monitoring that inbox and making sure that any notifications that we receive about rolling and balancing get tracked on our tracking sheet, as well as all of the files that get submitted to us get uploaded correctly into our database so that we can then work with them. But once we've got everything, we've received everything, we've got it all uploaded so that we're able to perform our checks. That's really where the data team kind of springs into action and things get a little busier for us. So the compliance review process takes place in 2 phases. As I mentioned, this is the start of the whole process right now. Is that really the first key thing that needs to happen is we need to be notified of a successful roll and balance. Once we've been notified of the roll and balance for each county, and the next step is getting the files submitted to us. And once the files are submitted to us, that's when we begin that primary review of the data set. We want to get a look at this data as soon as possible to try and catch any mistakes or errors that may have occurred, and get that information back to you so that can be fixed on your end as quickly as possible. So that occurs here in the fall. So August 31st is the due date for when all the counties need to have the real and personal property and oil and gas submitted to us. So shortly thereafter, we begin our reviews as soon as we can on that. The secondary review occurs in the spring. So that is after the auditor has submitted the tax data to the department via the Gateway Abstract application. Once we have that information, that's when we can kind of finish up our entire review process. That connects back to these assessment files that we receive here in the fall. We just want to, again, make sure everything matches up and it lines up correctly so that when tax bills go out, there aren't any kind of issues there behind the data that we're using. This is a change for the next review cycle, the upcoming review cycle that we're going to be doing in Pay 2025. We are dropping from a 3% threshold down to a 2% tolerance as the threshold for determining if a county's real property data submission is pending. So this is a change from last year. As I mentioned, last year we kept it the same as the prior year. Well, it was a 3% was that threshold, but we're wanting to continue to work towards getting cleaner and cleaner data. I think my predecessor, James Johnson, when he first started, he instituted a 5% tolerance threshold and kind of worked his way down to a 3%. We're following his lead on that, and we're wanting to continue to make this data as clean as possible. So we're going to be dropping it down to a 2% tolerance level for this upcoming cycle. So just quickly here to make sure you understand what I mean by that. The data division performs 30 separate checks on the real property that gets submitted to us. For each one of those checks, we keep track of all of the different errors or things that we think are missing or potential mistakes there within the data files that we've received. All of the mistakes for a given check, so let's just call it like check 19. For check 19, if we count up that there are 100 different errors in the data that we're looking at, and we then look at all of those different errors, those 100 different errors, and we add up the total assessed values associated with the records that are showing errors. So for those 100 records that we found errors on, we take the assessed value, we add that up to get a sum, and then so that is the sum of the total assessed value of the records that are erroring for a particular check. We then take that sum and compare that to the gross assessed value for the entire county. And if that percentage, taking the what's erroring out versus the gross assessed value for the entire county, if that percentage is higher than a 2% threshold, that's when that particular check is failed. And that county would then get a non-compliant status, and that would need to be corrected and sent back into us. So again, we're changing that from a 3% threshold on all of our checks to a 2% threshold on all of our checks, with the idea being we want to just continually improve the process and make this data cleaner and cleaner and better serve our taxpayers as best we can. So when the department completes its review, its initial review, we will send results back to each of the counties. That will come in the form of an email, and that email will contain 2 documents that contain our findings that we got when we performed our review. The first file that I'm going to talk about is the Real Property Issues Workbook, and this will be in the form of an Excel file, and it will provide an itemized breakdown of all of the records that contain probable or possible errors based on our compliance checks. That's an important thing to note there, or the probable possible. That wasn't just an accident that I put that there. There are some cases where we find what we think is an error, and after some communication back and forth with the county, it turns out that it wasn't an error, or for some reason it didn't necessarily, it popped in our system, but it wasn't an error. It just needs to be talked out between us and the county. That does happen sometimes. However, the vast majority of the time, we're pretty good at it. We do catch, like, it is an actual error. It is something that needs to be fixed, which needs to be done on the county's end of things, and then taken care of and resubmitted back to us. So the issues workbook is going to basically provide you a list of all of those errors or potential errors that we found. That Excel file will give you that granular level detail and hopefully be able to point you directly to where at in the data file we are seeing something that doesn't look right. So that's the more granular level document. The kind of summary level document that will give you more of a statistical analysis and list all of the different checks that we've done and just look at it as more of kind of a category basis. Did your county pass check 1? Did it pass check 2? Did it pass check 3? So on and so forth. The compliance report will come as a PDF and should be very clearly listed as to how your county performed with each one of these different checks that we did. It will also have your official status up at the top of that report. telling you if you are non-compliant and that we need to work on our data set and get that sent back to the department, or if it is pending, in which case you are good to go with the data that you submitted here in the fall, and we'll just wait until we get more data in the spring to wrap things up and give you a final status report. So that real property issues workbook, that Excel file that I mentioned, will contain multiple tabs to it. Each tab corresponds to a given check that we are performing. So for instance, I mentioned like check 19 in a further example I was trying to illustrate. Check 19 in a given county had 100 errors in that. If that were the case, if there were 100 errors that we caught on check 19, there should be a tab in the issues workbook that will contain 100 lines identifying each record that generated an error. So for every check that produced errors out of those 30 different checks, it is possible that you could have 30 different tabs open across the bottom of that Excel file. I've seen that happen myself. Usually most counties do a really good job with their data, and it's just a few of the checks that we need to get cleaned up. So there will often be times, well, there's a maximum of 30 tabs, but that usually isn't the case. It's usually much less than that. But mentioning it now, just to make sure that when you get that file, when you receive that file back from us, you look across the bottom at the multiple tabs, if that's applicable, and look through all of those errors that or potential errors that we found. When we send that back to you in the spring, it's going to basically be the exact same file, but it will have more tabs on it since the workbook sent in the fall only has the information regarding that fall data. The spring, when we send it back to you in the spring, will have additional checks that we've performed where we're comparing the real property data that we were sent in the fall with the abstract data that we received from the county auditor's office during the gateway abstract submission. So I mentioned 30 different checks that the data team runs here as part of our compliance review process. This is meant to be kind of a summary or just to give you an idea of some of the different things we check for. This list isn't exhaustive, but we are looking at, in a lot of instances, the AV allocation, where we compare the property class code assigned to a parcel and compare that against its AV allocations that it's split up amongst. We look at the parcel number format that's assigned by the state. One thing we're definitely on the lookout for is, especially in the parcel file itself, any duplicate parcel numbers. That's something that's gonna ping as an error. There's a state assigned district that every parcel should be within one of those state assigned districts. So we check on that. We check for valid property class codes. And as well as the parcel file property tax cap additions. Basically, the AV that is listed in the parcel file needs to match up with all of the different tax cap that it's split up into. If we have a multi-use parcel that has property that exists in the 1% and 3% tax cap bucket, we need for the amount of AV that's in the 1% and the 3% to add up to the total amount that's in the parcel file. So that's definitely something we check. We keep an eye out for any negative and non-numeric assessed values. The land file and the parcel file, as I mentioned, we need to have those matching records. Everything has to match that's in the land file, has to match back to the parcel file. Same thing with the improved, it has to map back to that parcel file. We look for any improvement, AV adjustment, and land AV adjustment checks. Any blanks on the property address and owner's name, as well as all of the different pieces that need to be in place for government-owned parcels. That's with property class code 600 through 669, and any non-government-owned exempt parcels like property class code 670 through 699. We also check the classified land. The land AV check that involves taking the land file and comparing that with the parcel file. Excuse me. We also have a check for the legally deeded acreage, again, checking on the land file versus the parcel file. And then in the spring, again, we're trying to give you a picture of the whole process here. We're going to check that parcel file versus the tax data file that we get from the county auditor's office. And we're looking for any missing records that are in either data set where stuff doesn't match up like it's supposed to, and make sure that's all accounted for. And then also check for any discrepancies in the gross AVs. So I mentioned this kind of status that you receive at the top of your report, that PDF file. It'll have one of 3 outcomes on there, and for the fall, it's really only one of 2 outcomes. The first outcome is the not good one. If we're non-compliant, that means we failed one of those 30 checks. It is over that 2% threshold, and we need to get some corrections made before the department can accept that data as compliant. And sorry, I used the wrong word there, as pending. So non-compliant is like the bad outcome, the one that you don't want. Pending is the outcome that you do want for the fall. And again, this is because it's an incomplete process, right? We still need to compare that with the spring files, the data that's going to be submitted to us in the spring. So the classification or the outcome that you're wanting there in the fall is to get a pending status issued. The compliant status will come at the end of the spring review process. So I think I mentioned this before, but if a county's real property is deemed non-compliant, we need you to review the errors, make any necessary corrections, and then resubmit the data back to the data inbox for another round of reviews. If it is pending, that's what you want. That's a status only applicable to the fall review. No further action is required. Now, that doesn't mean that the data is pristine, crystal clear, perfect. It's just underneath that 2% threshold for all 30 of the checks. We still recommend going back through the issues workbook and look at those items that we found where we said, hey, I think this is an error. Can you go back and take a look at this and make this correction? It is possible that in future cycles, we're going to lower that threshold even more. We lowered it this year from a 3% to a 2%. So if that record stays and that kind of error keeps happening, it could be next year that you might fall into the non-compliant category. So highly recommend doing that, kind of taking a look at the issues workbook and making sure that you make all the corrections that you can to your data. This is for the spring. Again, the spring, what you're looking for there is a compliant status. You're wanting that's essentially means you're done. You're good. You've made it all the way through. The data is good to go. No further action is required. It is possible, though, that you can get a non-compliant status in the spring, which means that we need to make some changes and make some corrections there and get it resubmitted so that we are in good shape there for the rest of for when tax bills go out. So even though we'll send it again in the spring, you'll get an issues workbook as well. We highly recommend you looking through that and just correcting any errors that you can for the next review cycle. The department's not going to add any new checks this year. Okay, all of the checks that we've done in the past couple of years now are just staying the same for pay 2025. So the only thing that is changing is that threshold tolerance level. We're going from that 3% to that 2%. So we just need to make sure that if the total AV from the list of records for a particular check exceeds 2%, the whole set's going to be non-compliant. We got to get that fixed. Okay, the personal property assessment data. There's going to be some very similar information here because a lot of the steps are the same as what we were doing in the real property assessment data. But initially, it's a little bit different because the files that we get are different and form a different hierarchy. So similar to the real property, we need to receive these files after a successful roll-in balance has occurred. So once we are notified of a roll-in balance, we're looking to receive not only the real property data files, and again, remember there were 7 of those, but we're looking to receive all 7 of those as a set. And then we're also looking to receive the 3 personal property files as a set. And that includes the purse prop file, the pool data file, and the appeal PP file needs to be sent into that data inbox. Again, this needs to come after a successful roll and balance and after we've been notified of a successful roll and balance. And then those 3 personal property files get sent into us. A lot easier hierarchy here. We just have the purse prop sitting on top, and then that breaks down into, or rather the offshoots are the pool data and the appeal PP. The purse prop file contains a complete inventory of all the personal property returns filed in the county, including those records that are business personal property exempt eligible. Contains data points such as property address, taxpayer information, current year assessed value information, and the principal business activity code for each personal property record. Again, this is just like in the real data set where the parcel file is connected to everything else. The other 2 files that are as part of the personal property data compliance set are always going to be linked back to the purse prop file. So the pool data gives us a little bit more granular level detail. It includes a complete inventory of all pooling schedule data related to the personal property returns that are filed in the county. Any given personal property record can have multiple pooling schedule records, so it can be in different pools, 1 through 4, depending on how that personal property return was completed. This will contain data points such as the pool number, acquisition start and end date, total cost, adjusted cost, and true tax value. Again, just like in the real property data, as I mentioned, everything in real property, everything connects back to the parcel file. In personal property, everything connects back to the purse prop file. So all instances of the pool data file, all instance of a property number need to link back up to that purse prop file. So that's one of the checks that we perform. The appeal personal property file is a complete inventory of all active appeal records related to the personal property records in the county. Any given personal property record can have no, 1, or multiple appeal records. It contains data points such as petitioner's contact information, grounds for appeal, original value, and revised value. And again, any instance of a property number in the appeal personal property file must match back up to that personal property or purse prop file. The data compliance follows a very similar structure as what I already went over in the real property section. Not 100%. I just looked at it. It's either 16 or 18 checks. I think it's 18 different checks that we perform here with the personal property versus the 30 checks that we perform on the real personal side or real property side. Again, this will take place in 2 phases. We do our primary review after we've received this data here in the fall, but the secondary review, the final piece of it is concluded in the spring. We are also dropping the threshold on the personal property compliance from a 3% to a 2%. So that is going to apply to both sets of property files. Similarly to the real property, we will also issue a personal property issues workbook, as well as the compliance report. So the Excel file and the PDF will be sent back to the county with our findings. It will have the same format, but again, there will only be 18 checks that were performed on the personal property side, whereas the real property has 30. Again, there will be multiple tabs which have a list of all of the different personal property records that generated errors. So again, any error that popped up that we saw as something that might be wrong, we will list out for you on that Excel file, and it will be listed within one of the tabs that correspond to the particular check that is listed in the PDF version of the report. The workbook that you will get in the spring, just like with the real property side, will have more tabs in it than what you receive in the fall. And that's just because of the additional data that we've received in the spring, the abstract data that we can compare the personal property that we received in the fall to. So the compliance review process, again, these are some of the checks that we do, some of our 18 checks. We're going to look at that property record number format, make sure it fits in the specified format, the pool data file format, the NAICS codes or NAICS codes was something that I think a number of counties got tripped up on either last year or the year before. So that's definitely something I would recommend giving a check before that data gets submitted to us. With those NAICS codes need to be valid. The taxpayer types, the purse prop and pool data matching records, the gross AV in the personal property file or purse prop file needs to be greater than the total cost that's in the pool data file. And the purse prop file, this is in the spring, we'll compare that to the tax data file as well and look for any missing records in either data set as well as discrepancies in the gross assessed values. In terms of beneficial status, it's the same as the real property. You will get either here in the fall, you'll either be non-compliant or pending. If it's non-compliant, we want to work on getting those errors corrected and sent back into us so that we can get you to a pending status. A pending status is what you are going for here in the fall. Once you've achieved that status, no further action is required by the county assessor in terms of correcting and resubmitting the data files. But again, we always recommend that you look through that issues workbook, that Excel file, and determine what corrections may be needed to the applicable records so that the same issues don't get repeated in the next year's cycle. The final status that you're looking for can only be achieved in the spring, where you will be deemed compliant if everything looks good, if all the checks have worked out. It's only applicable to the spring review. But again, when it says on your spring or your compliance report that you are in a compliant status, no further action is required. We don't need anything resubmitted to us. Similar to the real property checks, we're not going to add any new ones here for this new cycle. All of the checks will be the same from the last cycle in Pay 24, which were the same in Pay 23. So nothing has been changed in terms of the what we're checking the last couple of years. However, we are using that 2% tolerance, 2% threshold. So we're wanting that data to look even cleaner this year compared to last year. Okay, as I mentioned, this doesn't apply to all of the counties, but for those counties who have oil and gas assessment data that needs to be submitted to us, this is the brief discussion on those files. Same thing, we need this to happen after a successful roll-in balance has occurred. Once that has occurred, we need you to send notification of the successful roll-in balance to the data inbox. And then there's only 2 of these files. 2 of the oil and gas files also get sent into the department's data inbox. Very similar very simple hierarchy, I should say, just oil gas, and then oil gas all is linked to the oil gas file. The oil gas file will contain a complete inventory of all oil and gas leases in the county. It contains data points such as the well type, if it's oil or gas, acreage, average daily production, total assessed value, and a pertinence value for the well. This is the, again, it sits atop of the hierarchy. So the oil gas all has to link back to any instance in the any instance in the oil gas all file has to link back to the oil gas file. Just make sure that they're connected properly. Again, that oil gas all file will contain a complete inventory of all individual interest owners associated with the oil and gas leases filed in the county. Contains data points such as the interest type, either working or royalty, the interest factor, calculated assessment, and contact information for the individual interest owners. Again, it is linked back to that oil gas file. All right, I was going pretty fast there at the end, but tried to cover everything. I think I'm to the point now where I can answer some questions. Jenny, I'm not able to see the chat box. Do you know if have we had any questions pop up?
We do not have any questions right now, but what we can do is we can leave it open for just a few minutes I'll do a couple quick housekeeping items, and then if anybody does have any questions, you can enter those into the chat box. If not, you can always follow up with Josh or myself afterwards. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have that come to you after this webinar is over. But just as a reminder, you will get an email later this week that will include the PowerPoint, the video, the survey, as well as the CE form. Again, this is valid for 1 hour of CE credit. If you are an assessor or assessor staff, you will self-report that you attended on the CE form and submit that to education@dlgf.in.gov. If you are a different elected official, you will want to submit that to your county association or your county or governing body and or your association. Follow up with them, and then they will be able to tell you how to record that information. If you have any, we do appreciate all the feedback that you provide to us on that survey. So please take a moment and complete that afterwards as well. We will also be posting that same information on the DLGF website under the webinars page. So you can always reference back to that and or share that information from today with others within your office. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll also get a note that we have uploaded the video to the YouTube channel. So any of those options are available, but you will get that information later this week. We do appreciate you all joining us today. The August, as a reminder, the August webinar will be over deductions, and that will be presented by our legal team. Always a very popular webinar, and so I hope that you can all join us in August, and then we will be doing some more assessment related webinars later the rest of the year. So please check back on the webinar schedule, and hopefully you can join us at some future webinars. It looks like we don't have any questions right now. So as I said, please feel free to reach out to Josh or myself, or you can reach out to Delvia or Velvet, and they can also assist you too. Any questions can get directed to them or myself, and we'll get those answered for you. But we want to thank you all for joining us today, and hopefully we will see you in August. Thanks so much.